December 19, 1944. Inside a converted French army barracks in the historic city of Verdun, the most powerful generals of the Allied command gathered around a long wooden table. Maps were spread across the surface. Radios crackled in the background. Cold winter wind scraped against the windows. Every man in the room understood the gravity of this moment. Their expressions were grim, their silence heavier than the icy air outside. 3 days earlier, more than 200,000 German soldiers had smashed through American lines in the Ardennes forest. What Allied commanders had initially dismissed as a local counterattack was now clearly something far more devastating. A massive German offensive, coordinated, deliberate, and shockingly effective. American divisions had been overrun, encircled, and shattered. Roads were choked with refugees and retreating soldiers. Entire regiments had disappeared in the chaos. And at the center of this unfolding disaster was a small Belgian town called Bastogne, where elements of the 101st Airborne Division were surrounded and slowly being strangled. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower had called this emergency conference with one critical purpose: to find someone, anyone, who could launch a rapid counterattack northward to break the German encirclement and relieve Bastogne before it was too late. As Eisenhower addressed the room, his tone was calm but urgent. Maps were examined, logistics were weighed, distances were calculated. The winter conditions were brutal, the roads uncertain, and the front in total chaos. Most commanders believed such an operation would take at least a week. And then, to the disbelief of nearly everyone present, one man confidently stated the impossible. He could attack in 48 hours. That man was General George S. Patton. Most assumed he was bluffing. He was not, because Patton was the only general in that room who had seen this crisis coming. He had been preparing for it for 11 days. This is the story of how George Patton became the only Allied commander ready for the Battle of the Bulge, and how an unassuming intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, helped change the course of World War II. 10 days earlier, December 9, 1944, at Patton's headquarters in Nancy, France, Colonel Oscar Koch entered Patton's office carrying a thick stack of intelligence reports. Koch was not loud, flamboyant, or charismatic. He was methodical, analytical, and precise. And recently, he had been increasingly alarmed by what he was seeing. For weeks, Koch had been tracking German troop movements across the Western Front. Slowly, quietly, divisions were disappearing from Allied intelligence monitoring. Not small battalions, not individual regiments, full-strength divisions. 15 of them, including elite panzer units equipped with hundreds of tanks. Allied intelligence offered a simple explanation. The Germans were relocating these divisions as reserves to respond to future Allied breakthroughs. It was a tidy answer, the kind of explanation that offered reassurance in a war many believed was already nearly won. But Koch did not accept that explanation. He had spent months studying German operational behavior. The Wehrmacht did not pull 15 divisions off the line just to sit around waiting. That concentration of force represented offensive capability, significant offensive capability. Koch spread his maps across Patton's desk, pointing toward the Ardennes, a heavily wooded region where American divisions were thinly stretched over miles of front. To most Allied planners, the Ardennes was a quiet sector, perfect for resting tired units. To Koch, it looked like a target. The terrain was rugged, the roads narrow, the forests dense. These same conditions made Allied commanders believe a major attack there was impossible. But Koch reminded Patton of a critical historical fact. In 1940, the Germans had launched their most successful offensive of the war through this exact region, slicing through French defenses and reaching the English Channel in a matter of weeks. Now, Koch believed, they were preparing to try something similar again. Radio traffic across the German lines had surged. Civilian reports described unusual nighttime movements. Prisoner interrogations mentioned the arrival of new units. And most importantly, the missing German divisions remained unaccounted for. Patton listened, studying the maps. Finally, he asked Koch a single, direct question. "If you're right, when will the attack begin?" Koch's answer was immediate, within 2 weeks. Patton moved swiftly. He called General Omar Bradley, his superior officer, and laid out Koch's analysis. Bradley listened patiently, but ultimately dismissed the warning. The war was essentially over, he argued. The Germans didn't have the fuel, manpower, or industrial capacity for a major offensive. Intelligence from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAEF, insisted the Germans were kaput. Bradley told Patton to stay focused on his current offensive operations. Patton hung up the phone. He turned to Koch, and without hesitation, he gave the order that would change the course of the war. Start planning. Over the next 10 days, Patton's staff worked in total secrecy. They developed 3 complete contingency plans, Plans A, B, and C, each designed to rapidly shift Third Army northward in response to a German attack in the Ardennes. These were not simple outlines. They were highly detailed operational blueprints. Truck routes calculated down to individual road segments. Fuel depots repositioned. Artillery batteries assigned specific movement corridors. Infantry divisions given exact assembly points. Timing sequences mapped to the minute. Coordination diagrams planned for every conceivable scenario. To many on Patton's staff, this planning seemed absurd. Third Army was engaged in offensive operations toward Germany. They were winning. Why prepare for an emergency 100 miles to the north that no one else believed was coming? Because Patton trusted Oscar Koch's intelligence more than he trusted SHAEF's assumptions. On December 12th, Patton told his senior commanders to be ready to disengage from their current operations at a moment's notice. He did not explain why. They were confused, but they were Patton's officers. They prepared. By December 15th, Third Army was the only major American force with plans for a German offensive in the Ardennes. Everyone else expected the war to be over by Christmas. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16, 1944, the Ardennes exploded. Thousands of German artillery pieces opened fire along an 80-mile front. Entire American positions vanished under the barrage. Communications were severed, confusion spread, and then the infantry came. Waves of German troops surged forward behind the explosions. Tanks followed, smashing through fog and snow. 3 entire German armies, over 200,000 men, launched a coordinated assault against only 4 American divisions. The Americans were outnumbered nearly 4-1. At SHAEF, initial reports were dismissed. This was assumed to be a small counterattack, nothing more. It took hours for the magnitude of the disaster to become clear. Entire American units were being wiped out. The 106th Infantry Division, the newest division on the front, was nearly annihilated. 2 of its regiments surrendered wholesale. Thousands of American soldiers marched into captivity. At Bradley's headquarters, disbelief spread. Allied intelligence had assured them Germany was incapable of such an operation. But at Patton's headquarters, the reaction was different. Patton read the first reports, turned to Oscar Koch, and said simply, "You were right." And then he acted. While every other Allied command struggled to understand what was happening, Patton immediately ordered Third Army to execute the contingency plans. Units began disengaging from combat operations in their current sector. Logistical lines pivoted. Truck convoys moved into position. The grand maneuver was beginning. Patton had prepared for this moment for 11 days. No one else had. On December 19th, Eisenhower called the emergency meeting at Verdun. To some present, Eisenhower's opening statement was surprising. Instead of despair, he emphasized opportunity. The German army had abandoned its defensive positions. It was exposed. If the Allies could strike rapidly enough, they could turn this crisis into a decisive victory. But rapid movement was exactly the problem. Most Allied units were locked in ongoing operations. Redeploying in winter conditions seemed nearly impossible. So Eisenhower asked what everyone in the room already feared. How soon can someone attack north toward Bastogne? Silence. Maps were studied, distances measured, weather conditions considered. Commanders mulled over the immense logistical nightmare of reorienting entire divisions. Then Patton spoke. He could attack in 48 hours with 2 divisions, and in 72 hours with 3. The room fell silent. Some believed he was exaggerating. Others believed he was insane. Launching such a massive maneuver on such short notice was unheard of, operationally impossible.
But Patton wasn't exaggerating. He calmly explained that he had already prepared contingency plans. He had expected this attack. Third Army was already disengaging and pivoting north. Eisenhower stared at him for a long moment. He knew Patton well. He knew Patton was telling the truth. He gave the order, move. When Patton left the meeting, he made one phone call to Third Army headquarters. The message consisted of just 2 words, play ball. Those words activated the most complex rapid redeployment of the American Army during the entire war. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers began to turn north. Over 133,000 vehicles, tanks, trucks, half-tracks, jeeps, artillery pieces, rolled across narrow, icy roads. Supply lines shifted. Fuel trucks raced to pre-designated points. Medical units repositioned. Corps headquarters were redirected. And they moved fast. While other American formations were still trying to assess the German attack, Third Army was already executing a coordinated counteroffensive. Patton wasn't performing a miracle. He was following a plan carefully crafted 11 days earlier. On December 21st, less than 48 hours after Patton's promise, advance elements of the 4th Armored Division reached their attack positions. It was an astonishing feat of maneuver. The next day, on December 22nd, Third Army launched its attack northward. The terrain was brutal. Snow and ice covered the fields. German forces had prepared defenses along every approach route. Each mile had to be fought for, inch by inch. Tank battles erupted in frozen fields. Infantry slogged through snow-covered forests. Artillery thundered across the valleys. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne held on despite dwindling ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Surrounded by German forces on all sides, the paratroopers faced relentless attacks. But they held. They knew relief was coming. December 26, 1944, 4:50 p.m. Lead tanks of the 4th Armored Division broke through the final German resistance outside a small village near Bastogne. American soldiers made contact with elements of the 101st Airborne. The siege was broken. Supply convoys immediately poured into the town, bringing ammunition, food, medical supplies, and reinforcements. The narrow relief corridor came under constant attack, but Third Army held the line. Patton had delivered. His rapid response did not end the Battle of the Bulge, but it prevented disaster. Had Bastogne fallen, German armor could have reached deeper into Belgium, potentially splitting the Allied armies in 2. Instead, the German timetable collapsed. They had expected American confusion.
They got Patton. After the war, captured German commanders admitted something critical. They expected American confusion, American paralysis, American delays. They believed no major counterattack could happen in less than a week. Patton did it in 4 days. General Gunther Blumentritt described Patton as the most aggressive armored commander among the Allies. General Hasso von Montefell, who led the German 5th Panzer Army during the Ardennes offensive, stated that Patton's rapid counterattack shocked German planners. They had not anticipated that any American commander would prepare such a maneuver in advance. Someone on the American side, the Germans realized, had known exactly what they were planning. That someone was Oscar Koch, and the only commander who listened to him was George S. Patton. The Battle of the Bulge is often remembered as a shocking surprise, but the truth is more complex. The failure was not due to lack of information. The evidence existed. Missing German divisions, increased radio traffic, civilian reports, prisoner interrogations, logistical movements. The failure occurred because SHAEF analysts assumed Germany was finished. Every report was interpreted through that assumption. Oscar Koch made no such assumption. He followed the evidence. He saw a concentration of force, not a retreat. He saw opportunity, not collapse. And Patton trusted him. While other commanders dismissed Koch's analysis, Patton took it seriously enough to plan for the worst-case scenario. That decision, made quietly in a headquarters office in Nancy, saved thousands of American lives. Patton was not lucky. He was not reckless. He was not guessing. He was prepared. Prepared because he trusted his intelligence officer. Prepared because he refused to accept easy assumptions. Prepared because he demanded plans for the unthinkable. On December 19th, when Patton promised he could attack in 48 hours, the other generals stared in disbelief. They couldn't understand how such an operation was even possible. Patton understood, because he had already done the work. In war, luck matters, courage matters, firepower matters, but preparation is everything. And that is why, on that frozen winter morning in December 1944, George S. Patton was the only general ready for the Battle of the Bulge.